This is important because it comes from the verb kum in Hebrew. In the concordance, as the concordance says it, Yahuyaquim, from Yahweh, and kum, Yahweh raises up, whom Yahweh has set up. So is the union of Yahweh and kum. The word kum, it is known and seen as a prophetical word because of the dream that Joseph had in Genesis. When we read the book of Genesis, Joseph, the son of Jacob, had two dreams. One of which the wheat, pretty much, that his brothers were gathering, basically nailed before the one that he was gathering, and the one that he was gathering, pretty much a whole bunch of it, uh, raised up, as in the word or the verb kum. So Yahuyaquim represents the fulfillment. I mean the name, because the man was not as set apart or righteous, but the name of that man, who happened to be the king of Yahudah, therefore the king of the chosen few. Yahudah represents the chosen few, and Israel the many. Both groups will enter, the few as the kings and priests, and the many as the people of the nation, to rule over the rest of the nations that will be around the promised land when Yahweh extends its borders and everything else that he already promised. So Yahuyaquim represents the one whom Yahweh will raise up, as was prophesied in the dream of Joseph, through that same verb, which is known prophetically, that it represents, at least in Judaism, that it represents the coming of Mashiach ben Yosef. So, and that means, well, the Messiah, son of Joseph. So Kum represents the coming of the last, the second coming, the prophet like Moshe, the Mashiach ben Yosef, represented by the name Yahuyaquim. And then is in the third year, which represents the 3 years and a half that the witness like Moshe, descendant of Joseph, will have to testify against the nations, against Babel, or Babylon, confusion, the confusion of the world. So the world will kill him after Yahweh raises him up during those first 3 years. After those first 3 years, the last 6 months will be pretty much the time that his testimony will come to an end, and then the world will be able to kill him. And I mean, the world will be agreeing with what the beast will do, since the beast will be the one who will kill the two witnesses. So, going back, in the third year of the reign of Yahuyaquim, king of Yahudah, showing how the last son of Joseph will become, through Yahushua HaMashiach, the king of the chosen few, 144,000, in the third year of his reign, or of his testimony. Because remember that in Revelation 6, where we see the coming of the witness like Moshe, whom unfortunately Christian people say is the Antichrist, in that verse it says that he who comes to conquer is given a crown. So he who comes riding the white horse is given a crown. That means he's given reign, he's given power to start his ministry for 3.5 years. So we are reading here now Yahuyaquim, which represents that last one in the third year, meaning the third year of his reign, meaning 3 years after he got the crown of Revelation 6:1. I hope that is being clear. If not, just ask all your questions and then we'll see them. And I just want to go through the chapter without having to go through the entire scriptures.